The silver scissors in Rosie Sullivan's hand froze mid-snip, hovering inches from Martha Wilson's thinning gray hair. What should have been routine Friday appointment had just become a medical emergency. "Oh my God, Martha," Rosie whispered, her voice barely audible over the salon's soft music. "How long has your scalp been like this?" The metal tray of styling products crashed to the floor as Rosie's assistant Becky stumbled backward, hand covering her mouth at the sight of the raw, crusted patches hidden beneath Martha's carefully arranged hair. Martha's blue eyes met Rosie's in the mirror, a flicker of shame and fear quickly replaced by the practiced smile of a woman who'd spent decades pretending everything was fine. 20 years teaching fourth graders had taught her to hide pain well. "We need to get you to a doctor right now," Rosie declared, already reaching for the phone. What had Linda been doing, or not doing, to her own mother? And why hadn't anyone noticed until now? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Seaside Haven, Maine wore its name honestly. Nestled along the rocky Atlantic coastline, the town of 5,000 souls presented a postcard image of New England charm with its weathered clapboard houses, family-owned shops, and fishing boats dotting the harbor. It was the kind of place where generations stayed put, where families knew each other's histories stretching back decades, and where everyone's business inevitably became everyone else's. At the center of it all stood Rosie's Hair Salon, a Main Street fixture for 40 years. More than just a place for cuts and perms, it functioned as the town's unofficial information exchange, where news traveled faster than the coastal winds. Rosie Sullivan, with her frank manner and encyclopedic knowledge of local affairs, served as the community's trusted confidant. Martha Wilson had once been at the heart of Seaside Haven's lifeblood. For 30 years, she had taught at Seaside Elementary, guiding generations of the town's children through multiplication tables and history lessons. Her classroom was legendary, colorful, welcoming, and demanding in equal measure. Martha Wilson expected excellence, but showed endless patience in helping students achieve it. The Teacher of the Year plaque hanging in her former living room had collected dust, but the impact she'd made remained fresh in the minds of hundreds of former students. 2 years ago, everything changed. A mild stroke followed by her husband Henry's sudden heart attack had transformed Martha from a vibrant community pillar into a seemingly frail widow. Within months, her daughter Linda had arrived from Boston, initially to help Mother adjust, but quickly assuming control over every aspect of Martha's life. The family home on Lighthouse Road had been temporarily listed under Linda's name for estate planning purposes. Martha's social circle had gradually contracted as Linda implemented an increasingly complicated schedule that made visits difficult. Linda Prescott presented the perfect image of filial devotion. Her Instagram account featured carefully arranged photos of mother-daughter tea times and captions extolling the privilege of caring for my amazing mom. At community functions, she spoke eloquently about honoring our elders and the sacred duty of caregiving. The Seaside Haven Garden Club had even awarded her their Compassionate Community Member certificate last spring. What nobody saw were the cameras installed throughout Martha's home, monitoring her every move. Nobody knew about the medications Martha took without question, or how her bank accounts had been systematically drained. Nobody realized that Martha's occasional confusion wasn't age-related decline, but the result of carefully calibrated sedation. The vibrant teacher who had once commanded classrooms had been reduced to a whisper of herself, trapped in a gilded cage of her daughter's construction. Until today, when a simple haircut appointment, one Martha had managed to schedule during Linda's monthly executive meeting in Portland, revealed what had been hidden beneath carefully maintained appearances, both literally and figuratively. Martha hadn't intended rebellion when she called Rosie's salon. After 8 months without a proper haircut, Linda's home trims leaving her looking increasingly unkempt, she had simply reached for a small piece of normalcy. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Linda's marketing firm had called an emergency strategy meeting in Portland, giving Martha a rare 5 hours of solitude. "I'll leave your lunch in the refrigerator, Mother," Linda had said that morning, checking her sleek designer watch. "Take your 1 o'clock pills. I've left them in the dispenser. And remember, the security system will alert me if any doors open, so please don't wander outside. Mrs. Peterson next door is watching for my car, just in case." Martha had nodded obediently, the practiced smile of acquiescence firmly in place. Only after Linda's BMW disappeared around the corner did she reach for the ancient address book hidden inside her crossword puzzle collection, hands trembling slightly as she dialed Rosie's number. "Rosie's hair salon," came the familiar raspy voice, bringing a flood of memories from the days when Martha had visited monthly for her standing appointment. "Rosie, it's Martha Wilson." "Martha! Land's sakes, it's been forever. Linda told us you weren't up for coming in anymore." Martha's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm feeling much better today. I was wondering, do you have any openings this afternoon? Around 1? 40 minutes later, Martha stood on her front porch, heart racing as she deliberately triggered the security alert by opening the door. She had exactly 3 minutes before Linda would call to check. Enough time to reach the sidewalk where Rosie's assistant Becky waited in her car as promised. "You look good, Mrs. Wilson," Becky offered as they drove, though her eyes betrayed concern at Martha's thinness, at the way her clothes hung loosely on her once sturdy frame. "Oh, honey, we both know that's not true," Martha laughed. "But we're going to fix that today." The salon's familiar bell chimed as they entered, and for a moment Martha was transported back to better days. The scent of shampoo and styling products, the gentle hum of hair dryers, the laughter of women sharing stories, it all remained unchanged while her life had contracted into an increasingly controlled existence. Rosie emerged from the back room, arms outstretched. "Martha Wilson! Get over here and give me a hug!" Her exuberance faltered only slightly when she felt the bony shoulders beneath her embrace. "Let's get you shampooed and in my chair. We've got some catching up to do." The warmth of the water and the gentle pressure of the shampoo massage nearly brought tears to Martha's eyes. How long had it been since anyone had touched her with such simple kindness? Linda's ministrations were always efficient, clinical, focused on completing tasks rather than providing comfort. "So how've you been, really?" Rosie asked once Martha was settled in the styling chair, cape draped around her shoulders. "We don't see you at community functions anymore." "Linda keeps me quite busy," Martha answered carefully. "She's very devoted." Rosie made a non-committal sound, lifting sections of Martha's hair. "What are we thinking today? Same layered bob you used to wear?" "Yes, please. Something that looks—" Martha paused, searching for the right word. "Something that looks like me again." It was when Rosie began separating the hair at the nape of Martha's neck that everything changed. The veteran stylist's hands stilled and the salon's cheerful atmosphere evaporated. "Martha," Rosie said quietly, angling the mirror so Martha could see the reflection of the back of her head. "What happened here?" The image reflected made Martha's stomach turn. Beneath the carefully arranged top layer of her silver hair, her scalp was a landscape of angry red patches, some crusted and oozing, others scaly and inflamed. The truth hit her with shocking force. She couldn't see the back of her head in her bathroom mirror, and Linda had been washing her hair for months, ostensibly to prevent falls. I didn't know," Martha whispered, genuinely horrified. "I've been having headaches, feeling tired, but Linda said it was just age." Rosie's professional demeanor took over as she gently examined the area. "This looks like a severe fungal infection, Martha. It's been going on for quite some time, based on how widespread it is. You need medical attention, not a haircut." The salon phone rang, cutting through the tension. Becky answered, her expression shifting as she held out the receiver to Rosie. "It's Linda Prescott." "She's looking for her mother." Martha's hands began to tremble beneath the cape. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't." Rosie took the phone, her face hardening. "Linda? Yes, your mother is here getting her hair done. Well, actually, we've run into a situation. No, she can't come to the phone right now. I think you should come down here immediately. It concerns your mother's health." The 20 minutes it took Linda to arrive felt interminable. Rosie had guided Martha to the break room, offering her tea and quiet reassurance while they waited. "You're not alone in this anymore," she promised, patting Martha's hand. "Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together." Linda burst through the salon door like a storm front, designer heels clicking aggressively against the tile floor. At 42, she cut an impressive figure, perfectly highlighted hair, tailored charcoal suit, the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "Mother," she said, her voice honeyed with concern though her eyes flashed with barely concealed anger. "You know you shouldn't be out alone. Your blood pressure medication makes you dizzy." Before Martha could respond, Rosie stepped forward. "Linda, your mother has a serious medical condition that needs immediate attention." She gestured toward the back of Martha's head, where the infection was most visible. Linda's reaction was not what anyone expected. Rather than shock or concern, her first response was defensive. "Mother has a wonderful dermatologist. Dr. Roberts checks her regularly. This is probably just an allergic reaction to her new shampoo." "This is not an allergic reaction," Rosie countered firmly. "This is a severe infection that's been developing for weeks, maybe months. It needs treatment now." "I'm taking her to Dr. Roberts immediately," Linda announced, reaching for Martha's arm. "Come along, Mother." Something in Martha snapped. Perhaps it was the humiliation of discovering her condition in such a public setting. Perhaps it was the accumulated indignities of the past 2 years. Whatever the cause, she pulled her arm from Linda's grasp. "No," she said, her teacher's voice emerging from somewhere deep inside. "I want to go to the emergency room. Now." Linda's smile tightened. "Mother, you're confused. Dr. Roberts knows your case history." "I'm not confused, Linda. I'm infected. And I want a second opinion." The standoff might have continued if Martha hadn't suddenly swayed, her face paling alarmingly. "I don't feel well," she murmured, just before her knees buckled. Rosie caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her gently into a nearby styling chair. "Becky, call 911, she ordered, checking Martha's pulse. "Tell them we have an elderly woman with a severe scalp infection who's just collapsed." The ambulance arrived within minutes, the paramedics efficiently transferring Martha to a stretcher while taking her vitals. Her temperature registered 102.8, her blood pressure dangerously low. Throughout the assessment, Linda maintained her composed facade, providing insurance information and answering questions about Martha's medical history with practiced precision. "I'll follow in my car," Linda told the paramedics as they loaded Martha into the ambulance. "She has complex medical needs. Dr. James Roberts is her physician. He should be contacted immediately." As the ambulance doors closed, Rosie caught Martha's hand for a brief moment. "I'll check on you later," she promised. Martha squeezed her fingers weakly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." At Seaside Community Hospital, the emergency room team moved with urgent efficiency. Dr. Elena Patel, the attending physician, took one look at Martha's scalp and ordered blood work, IV antibiotics, and a dermatology consult. "This infection is severe and appears to have been present for some time," she told Linda in the hallway, her tone professional but pointed. "Why wasn't this treated earlier?" Linda's explanation was smooth. "My mother has been reluctant to let me examine her properly." You know how the elderly can be about their privacy. I've been giving her medicated shampoo, but she must have been missing areas when washing her hair." Dr. Patel's expression remained neutral, but her next questions took on a more probing quality. "I see from her chart that your mother had a minor stroke 2 years ago. Has she been seen regularly by a neurologist since then?" "Dr. Roberts manages all her care," Linda replied. "He's very thorough." "And these medications she's taking," Dr. Patel continued, reviewing the list Linda had provided. "The dosage of lorazepam seems unusually high for someone her age. Mother has severe anxiety. Dr. Roberts found this dosage necessary to manage her symptoms." Throughout the exchange, Linda maintained her composure, answering each question with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. Yet, as Martha was admitted for what Dr. Patel described as observation and treatment of a serious systemic infection, something in Linda's demeanor shifted subtly. The perfect daughter facade developed almost imperceptible cracks. In her hospital room, Martha drifted in and out of consciousness as antibiotics flowed into her veins. For the first time in months, she was beyond Linda's immediate control, surrounded by medical professionals whose job was to observe and question. Through the fog of fever and medication, one thought crystallized with surprising clarity. This unexpected haircut might have saved her life in more ways than one. In the corridor outside, Rosie Sullivan stood her ground against Linda's increasingly irritated insistence that she leave. "I've known Martha for 40 years, Rosie stated firmly. "I'm staying until I know she's stable." "This is a family matter," Linda hissed, her perfect smile slipping. "You're just her hairdresser." "And you're just her daughter," Rosie countered. "The daughter who somehow didn't notice a massive infection on her mother's scalp. The daughter who's been keeping Martha isolated from her friends for 2 years. So I'll be staying right here, Linda, because someone needs to be watching out for Martha's interests. And I'm not convinced that someone is you." By the 3rd day of Martha's hospitalization, the private room in Seaside Community Hospital's medical wing had become the epicenter of a quietly escalating crisis. The fungal infection, identified as a severe case of Tinea capitis complicated by secondary bacterial infection, had spread more extensively than initially diagnosed. Blood tests revealed the infection had entered Martha's bloodstream, creating a dangerous systemic condition that required aggressive treatment. "We're looking at a condition that's been developing for at least 2 to 3 months, Dr. Elena Patel explained during morning rounds, her voice carefully modulated as Linda stood at the foot of the bed, smartphone in hand, as if documenting every word. "The fungal infection weakened the skin barrier, allowing bacteria to enter. Mrs. Wilson, have you been experiencing headaches, fatigue, confusion?" Martha, propped against stark white pillows that emphasized her pallor, glanced quickly at Linda before answering. "Yes, quite often. I thought it was just getting older." "And the scalp condition itself, you weren't aware of it?" "I knew something wasn't right," Martha admitted. "It was itchy, painful sometimes. But Linda washes my hair. She said it was just dry scalp." Linda's perfectly manicured hand closed more tightly around her phone. "Mother has been increasingly confused, Doctor. She often doesn't communicate clearly about her symptoms." Dr. Patel made a non-committal sound, noting something in the chart. "I'd like to adjust your medication regimen, Mrs. Wilson. Some of your current prescriptions may be contributing to your symptoms rather than alleviating them." "Dr. Roberts has carefully calibrated her medication," Linda interjected smoothly. "Mother's condition is quite delicate. Nevertheless," Dr. Patel continued, "I'm consulting with our geriatric specialist and making some changes, and I'd like to request a social work consultation as well." Linda's professional smile didn't waver, but a muscle tightened visibly along her jawline. "Is that really necessary? I assure you, Mother receives excellent care at home." Standard procedure with elderly patients experiencing unexplained medical neglect, Dr. Patel replied, meeting Linda's gaze directly. I'm sure you understand our obligation to be thorough. After the doctor left, Linda spent several minutes on her phone, her voice low and urgent as she paced the corridor outside Martha's room. Through the partially open door, Martha caught fragments. Becoming complicated. Need to accelerate the timeline. Situation containable but concerning. Later that afternoon, a soft knock preceded the arrival of Patricia Reynolds, the hospital's senior social worker. In her 50s, with prematurely silver hair and kind eyes behind practical glasses, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had navigated thousands of difficult family situations. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Patricia from Social Services. Do you feel up to chatting for a few minutes? Martha nodded, grateful that Linda had finally departed for a critical work meeting after hovering relentlessly since admission. I understand you've been living with your daughter since your husband passed away, Patricia began, settling into the visitor's chair with a clipboard balanced on her knee. Yes, after Henry died. Martha's voice caught unexpectedly. Even after 2 years, the loss felt raw. Linda said it would be best if she managed things. And how has that arrangement been working for you? The simple question, asked without judgment, pierced something in Martha's carefully maintained composure. For a moment she considered the practiced response. Everything is fine, Linda is wonderful, but instead found herself saying, I'm not sure anymore. Over the next hour, Patricia gently untangled threads of Martha's recent history. The gradual surrender of financial control. It was just easier to let Linda handle the banking. The increasing isolation. My friends stopped calling. Or perhaps Linda stopped telling me about their calls. The growing dependency. The security system alerts Linda if I open an exterior door. Mrs. Wilson, Patricia said carefully when they'd finished, what you're describing contains several red flags for what we call caregiver overreach, possibly extending to financial exploitation. Would you be comfortable if I assigned a case manager to look more closely at your situation? Martha's hands twisted the thin hospital blanket. Linda would be very upset. This isn't about punishing Linda, Patricia assured her. It's about ensuring you have the support and independence you need. You're only 60, Mrs. Wilson. With proper medical care and appropriate support, you could have many active, independent years ahead. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s, wearing an expensive suit beneath a white lab coat. Martha, my dear, he greeted with practiced warmth. I came as soon as I could. Patricia stood, extending her hand. Dr. Roberts, I presume. Patricia Reynolds, Hospital Social Services. James Roberts, he confirmed, his handshake brief and dismissive as he turned immediately back to Martha. Linda called me about this unfortunate situation. I've reviewed your chart and spoken with Dr. Patel. We'll have you back home and comfortable in no time. Something in his confident assertion sent a chill through Martha. Home had ceased to be comfortable long ago. Dr. Roberts, Patricia interjected, I was just discussing with Mrs. Wilson some concerns about her home care situation. Dr. Roberts's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. I've been Martha's physician for 15 years. I assure you, her daughter provides exemplary care under my close supervision. Then perhaps you can explain why Mrs. Wilson developed such a severe infection without medical intervention, or why her medication regimen includes unusually high doses of sedatives inappropriate for her age group. The confrontation might have escalated further if Martha's phone hadn't chimed with an incoming text message. Fumbling with the device Linda had reluctantly returned to her that morning, Martha opened a message from an unknown number. Mrs. Wilson, you don't know me, but I'm trying to help. Don't trust Dr. Roberts. Check your bank statements. Evidence being gathered. Stay strong." Martha quickly darkened the screen, heart pounding. Who could be sending such messages, and what evidence were they referring to? "Doctor." Roberts departed shortly after, promising to sort out this medication misunderstanding with Dr. Patel. Patricia left her card on the bedside table with a gentle squeeze of Martha's hand. "Call me any time, day or night," she urged. "My direct line is on the back." That evening, as shadows lengthened across the hospital room, Martha received an unexpected visitor. Rosie Sullivan arrived bearing a small arrangement of garden flowers and determination written across her features. "Linda tried to have me barred from visiting," she announced, placing the flowers on the windowsill. "Said family only. Fortunately, Nurse Jenkins was my second cousin's maid of honor 20 years ago. Amazing how small-town connections work, isn't it?" For the first time in days, Martha laughed genuinely. "You always were unstoppable, Rosie." "How are you really doing, honey?" Rosie asked, settling into the visitor's chair and reaching for Martha's hand. "And don't give me that 'I'm fine' nonsense." "Well, we're way past that." The simple touch of Rosie's weathered hand, a working woman's hand, strong and capable, broke something in Martha's carefully constructed walls. Words began pouring out. Linda's gradual takeover of every aspect of her life, the subtle gaslighting, the medications that left her foggy and compliant, the security system that had transformed her home into a monitored cage. "She has cameras in every room except the bathroom," Martha whispered. "She checks my pill bottles to make sure I've taken everything. She controls every penny. My teacher's pension, Henry's life insurance, everything goes into accounts I can't access." Rosie's expression darkened with each revelation. "Martha Wilson, why on earth haven't you said something before now?" Martha's eyes dropped to the hospital blanket. "Shame, I suppose. What kind of mother raises a daughter who would do such things? And fear. Linda has convinced everyone I'm declining mentally. Who would believe me over her? She's so persuasive, so respected in the community." "I'd believe you," Rosie stated firmly. "And I bet a whole lot of other people would, too. Your former students, their parents, your colleagues. This town hasn't forgotten you, Martha, even if Linda has tried to make you invisible." Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving with evening medications, a noticeably smaller collection of pills than Martha's home regimen. As the nurse checked her vital signs, Martha noticed Rosie studying a document on the wall. "Your discharge papers are already being processed," Rosie noted after the nurse left. "Linda's listed as taking you home day after tomorrow." "But Dr. Patel said I'd need at least a week of IV antibiotics," Martha protested, a knot forming in her stomach. "Exactly." Rosie's expression was grim. "And guess who signed the discharge order? Dr. James Roberts." That night, alone in her hospital room, Martha was startled awake by her phone chiming with another text message. "Linda meeting with realtor tomorrow. House being listed for sale next week. Accessing your accounts now. Documenting everything. Don't sign anything. A friend." Martha stared at the screen, mind racing. The house, her home of 35 years, where she and Henry had raised their children, where decades of memories resided in every corner, was being sold without her knowledge or consent. How was that possible? With trembling fingers, she opened the bank app Linda had installed on her phone for emergencies. Linda had never shared the passwords, insisting on managing all financial matters herself. But now, Martha found herself already logged in. Someone had remotely configured her access. What she discovered sent waves of shock and betrayal crashing through her. Her teacher's pension account, empty. Henry's substantial life insurance payout transferred to an unknown account. Their joint savings drained to a minimal balance. The house she had paid off 15 years ago. Refinanced with a new mortgage, the proceeds nowhere to be seen. As the evidence of financial devastation accumulated on the small screen, Martha's shock crystallized into something unexpected. clarity, and determination. For the first time in 2 years, the fog of medicated compliance lifted completely, revealing the stark reality of her situation and the urgent need to fight back. When Linda arrived the following morning, immaculate as always in designer workwear, Martha was sitting upright in bed, her expression unreadable. "Good news, Mother," Linda announced brightly. "Dr. Roberts has approved your early discharge. We can continue your antibiotic treatment at home where you'll be more comfortable. I've already arranged for a private duty nurse for the first few days." Martha met her daughter's gaze steadily. "I've been looking at the banking app, Linda." The words hung in the air between them. Linda's smile flickered but quickly reinstated itself. "Banking app? Mother, you don't handle the finances anymore. Remember how confused you got with the checkbook last year?" "I'm not confused now," Martha replied, her voice gaining strength. "I saw the accounts, all of them. Where is my money, Linda? Where is Henry's insurance money? And why is there a new mortgage on a house that was paid in full?" Linda's expression shifted, calculation replacing concern. "This is exactly why I manage your finances, Mother. You're confused again. There's no new mortgage. Your money is perfectly safe." She reached for the call button. "I think we need to adjust your medication. You're becoming agitated." Martha moved the call button out of reach. "No more medications, Linda. No more lies. I want answers, and I want them now." For a moment, mother and daughter locked eyes in silent confrontation, a power struggle that would determine Martha's future. But before Linda could respond, Dr. Patel entered with a medical team for morning rounds, unwittingly interrupting the decisive moment. "Mrs. Wilson, how are you feeling today?" she asked, reviewing the vital signs chart. "Much better, doctor," Martha replied, never taking her eyes off Linda. "Clear-headed enough to make my own decisions." "That's excellent news. However, I'm concerned about this discharge order. Your blood work still shows significant infection markers. I believe you need at least 4 more days of IV antibiotics." Linda smoothly interjected, "Dr. Roberts feels Mother would recover better in familiar surroundings. We've arranged excellent home care." Dr. Patel's expression cooled noticeably. "Dr. Roberts is not the attending physician on this case. I am, and I'm not approving discharge until Mrs. Wilson's infection is properly controlled." As the medical team continued their examination, Martha noticed an unfamiliar young woman in scrubs observing from the doorway. Their eyes met briefly, and the woman gave an almost imperceptible nod before disappearing down the corridor. Later that day, the hospital ethics committee convened an emergency meeting regarding Martha's case. Medical records were reviewed, medication regimens questioned, and the hastily arranged discharge plan scrutinized. By evening, 2 significant developments had occurred. Martha's discharge had been placed on hold pending further investigation, and the hospital administration had received formal requests for Martha's complete medical records from Adult Protective Services. The battle for Martha's freedom had officially begun. The hospital room became Martha's sanctuary and battleground over the next week. Her physical condition improved steadily under Dr. Patel's care, the angry red inflammation on her scalp gradually receding, her fever subsiding, her strength returning in small but significant increments. But as her body healed, the full extent of her psychological and financial wounds began to surface, exposed like tender skin after a bandage is removed. Linda maintained her vigil with military precision, arriving each morning at 9 a.m. sharp, designer handbag containing her arsenal of documents, power of attorney forms, and medical directives, all bearing Martha's signature, though Martha had only foggy recollections of signing them. Each afternoon at precisely 2 p.m., Dr. Roberts would appear for a consultation, after which Martha invariably felt pressured to accept the accelerated discharge plan they continued to promote. "The longer you stay here, the harder it will be to readjust at home," Linda would insist, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "You know how you hate change, Mother." But the hospital had become a haven of unexpected allies. Nurse Jenkins, a no-nonsense veteran of 30 years on the medical floor, began scheduling Martha's pain medication for precisely when Linda stepped out for her daily conference calls. During these brief windows of clarity, Martha would receive a steady stream of visitors that Linda might have intercepted otherwise. Patricia Reynolds from Social Services brought pamphlets on elder rights and financial protection. "Just informational materials," she'd say casually if Linda returned unexpectedly. "Standard for all our senior patients." Rosie Sullivan smuggled in home-cooked meals to supplement the hospital diet, along with gossip from town that reminded Martha she hadn't been forgotten. "Half of Seaside Haven is asking about you," she reported. "Your former students especially. Tommy Grantham, he's 40 now with kids of his own, asks about you every time he comes in for a trim." On the 5th day of her hospitalization, during one of Linda's longer absences, Martha received another mysterious text. "Documenting medication discrepancies between hospital and home prescriptions. Bank records secured. Need your statement when safe to obtain." The messages both comforted and confused Martha. Who was this anonymous ally? How had they accessed her financial information? Most importantly, could they actually help her escape Linda's control? That afternoon, Martha found herself alone with Dr. Patel during rounds, a rare occurrence as Linda usually hovered nearby, interjecting explanations and corrections to Martha's responses. "Your blood work is showing excellent improvement, Mrs. Wilson," Dr. Patel noted, reviewing the chart. "The antifungal medication is working well. How's your energy level?" "Better every day," Martha replied. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "Dr. Patel, may I ask you something confidentially?" The physician nodded, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "Of course." "The medications I was taking at home, they're very different from what I'm receiving here, aren't they?" Dr. Patel's professional demeanor remained intact, but her eyes reflected concern. "Yes, Mrs. Wilson, they are. The regimen prescribed by Dr. Roberts contains several medications at dosages that would be considered inappropriate for someone your age and condition. Would they make me confused? Tired all the time? Sometimes I can't remember entire days. The combination of sedatives and anti-anxiety medications at those levels could certainly cause those symptoms, yes." Dr. Patel hesitated, then continued carefully. "Mrs. Wilson, I've consulted with our geriatric psychiatrist about your case. He's quite concerned that your medication regimen may have been contributing to symptoms that could be misinterpreted as cognitive decline." Martha absorbed this information, pieces clicking into place like a jigsaw puzzle finally revealing its picture. "In other words, the medications made me seem confused, and then my confusion was used to justify giving me more medication? That would be a troubling scenario, but yes, it's possible." Dr. Patel made a note in the chart. "Would you be willing to meet with Dr. Levine, our geriatric psychiatrist? He'd like to do a cognitive assessment now that your medication regimen has been adjusted." "Yes," Martha agreed firmly. "I want everything documented." That evening, as twilight painted the hospital room in gentle shadows, Martha found herself drawn to the window. From the 4th floor she could see the harbor in the distance, fishing boats returning after a day at sea, the lighthouse beginning its nightly vigil. Somewhere out there was her home, the crisp white colonial on Lighthouse Road where she and Henry had built their life, where they'd raised Linda and their son Michael. The thought of her son sent a familiar ache through her chest. Lost to a car accident just a year before Henry's death at only 38. Sometimes it seemed to Martha that all the light had gone out of her world in those 2 terrible years, first her son, then her husband. Perhaps that explained how easily she had surrendered to Linda's control. Grief had hollowed her out, left her vulnerable. A soft knock interrupted her reverie. Expecting Nurse Jenkins with evening medication, Martha turned to find a young woman standing hesitantly in the doorway. Early 20s, with a heart-shaped face framed by dark curls, dressed in hospital scrubs. "Mrs. Wilson?" the young woman asked. "I'm sorry to disturb you." Martha studied her, noting something vaguely familiar in the shape of her eyes, the set of her chin. "Do I know you, dear?" The young woman glanced down the hallway before stepping into the room and closing the door partially. "No, not exactly. I've been helping gather information about your situation. I've been texting you." Martha's pulse quickened. "You're my mysterious friend?" "My name is Emily," she said, approaching Martha's bedside. "Emily Wilson." The surname registered immediately. "Wilson. Are we related?" Emily nodded, tears suddenly brimming in her eyes. "I'm Michael's daughter. Your granddaughter." Martha's hand flew to her mouth, shock and disbelief washing over her. "Michael didn't have children. He would have told me." "He didn't know about me until I was 17, Emily explained gently. "My mother never told him. When I finally found him, we only had a few months together before the accident." Martha sank into the bedside chair, legs suddenly unsteady. "I have a granddaughter? All this time?" "I tried to contact you after Dad's funeral," Emily continued. "I called and wrote letters, but Linda intercepted everything. She told me you were too fragile, that knowing about me would only upset you." Her expression hardened. "Later I realized she was preventing any contact because I might threaten her control over you and your estate." Martha's mind raced, trying to process this revelation. A granddaughter, Michael's child. A piece of her son still in the world. "How did you find me now?" "I'm in my final year of law school, specializing in elder law. When my letters went unanswered, I became suspicious. I've spent the last 6 months investigating Linda and documenting her actions." Emily reached for Martha's hand. "I've been working with Patricia Reynolds from Social Services. When you were admitted to the hospital, she recognized your case matched the pattern I'd described and contacted me." "The texts," Martha murmured. "The bank access." Emily nodded. "I've been gathering evidence. Linda has systematically transferred over $850,000 from your account since taking control. Your pension, Dad's life insurance that should have partially come to me, proceeds from a reverse mortgage on your home. She's been using your money to fund her lifestyle while keeping you isolated and medicated." The betrayal cut deep, despite Martha's growing suspicions about her daughter's motives. Why would she do this? We gave her everything, supported her through college, helped with the down payment on her first home. "I can't explain her actions," Emily said gently, "but I can help stop them. I filed for an emergency guardianship hearing. With the medical evidence from Dr. Patel and the financial documentation I've gathered, we have a strong case to remove Linda's control." Martha's thoughts swirled with conflicting emotions. Joy at discovering her granddaughter, shock at the extent of Linda's betrayal, fear of the confrontation to come. "Linda won't give up easily." "No, she won't," Emily agreed. "That's why we need to be prepared." Over the next hour, grandmother and granddaughter began to know each other, discovering shared mannerisms, similar interests, the unmistakable Wilson laugh that Martha hadn't heard since Michael's death. Emily showed Martha photos on her phone. Michael holding his newborn daughter, his face alight with wonder and love. "He sent me these after he died," Martha whispered, touching the screen gently. "Said he had wonderful news to share when he visited next. Then the accident happened, and I never knew." "He loved you so much," Emily assured her. "In the short time I knew him, he talked about you constantly. How you inspired him to become a teacher, how you and Grandpa Henry were his heroes." As evening deepened into night, they formed a plan. Emily, working with Patricia Reynolds and Dr. Patel, would continue gathering evidence while maintaining her cover as a hospital employee. Martha would play along with Linda's plans while secretly preparing for the guardianship hearing. Most importantly, Martha would begin recording her interactions with Linda and Dr. Roberts using the phone Emily provided, a device identical to Martha's, but with specialized recording software installed. Linda's going to realize something's wrong eventually, Martha worried as Emily prepared to leave. She's very perceptive. By then we'll have everything we need, Emily assured her. Just hold on a little longer, Grandma. You're not alone anymore. After Emily departed, Martha sat by the window watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the harbor. The steady rhythm brought an unexpected peace. For 2 years, she had been lost in fog. Grief, medication, manipulation, all conspiring to keep her disoriented and compliant. Now, like ships guided by the lighthouse, she had found her bearings again. The following morning, Martha observed Linda with new clarity. Every solicitous gesture, every concerned inquiry about her comfort, every gentle suggestion about what's best, now revealed the manipulation beneath. When Linda mentioned casually that she'd taken the liberty of putting some of Martha's less used possessions in storage, Martha understood she was witnessing the systematic dismantling of her home in preparation for its sale. Actually, Martha replied with deliberate vagueness, I've been thinking it might be time for a change. Perhaps assisted living would be less burden on you, dear. Linda's expression brightened immediately. What a wonderful idea, Mother. I've actually been researching some excellent facilities. Riverview Estates is supposed to be lovely. Private rooms, gourmet meals, daily activities. That sounds perfect, Martha agreed, noting how quickly Linda had produced a glossy brochure from her handbag. Too quickly. This had been the plan all along. Sell the house, liquidate the assets, deposit Martha in a facility, and walk away with the proceeds. They have an opening next month, Linda continued enthusiastically. I've already submitted a preliminary application. We just need your signature on a few forms. Let me think about it for a day or two, Martha demurred. It's a big decision. Of course, Mother. Take all the time you need. Linda's tone was understanding, but her eyes betrayed impatience. Dr. Roberts believes you might be ready for discharge early next week. Wouldn't it be wonderful to spend your last few weeks at home before transitioning to your new life at Riverview? Last few weeks at home, the phrase chilled Martha to the bone. The home where she'd raised her family, taught Michael to ride a bicycle on the wide driveway, nursed Henry through his first heart attack, tended the garden that had won Seaside Haven's most beautiful landscape for 15 consecutive years, all to be enjoyed for a few weeks before being sold to fund Linda's lifestyle. That afternoon, Dr. Levine, the geriatric psychiatrist, conducted a comprehensive cognitive assessment. Unlike previous evaluations arranged by Dr. Roberts, this examination was thorough and unbiased. Martha worked through memory tests, problem-solving exercises, and verbal reasoning challenges with growing confidence. Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Levine concluded after 2 hours, your cognitive function is well within normal parameters for your age. In fact, your verbal reasoning scores are exceptional, likely reflecting your years as an educator. So I'm not experiencing dementia, not showing signs of cognitive decline? Not based on this assessment, no. Dr. Levine reviewed his notes. The confusion and memory issues you've experienced are more consistent with side effects from inappropriate medication than with neurodegenerative processes. Martha felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Medical validation of what she had begun to suspect. Her mind wasn't failing her. It had been deliberately clouded. As days passed and discharge loomed closer, Martha's support network expanded quietly behind the scenes. Rosie Sullivan rallied former colleagues from Seaside Elementary. Patricia Reynolds coordinated with Adult Protective Services. Emily continued gathering financial documentation while maintaining her cover as hospital staff. Martha found strength in unexpected memories, standing firm against budget cuts that would have eliminated art programs at her school, negotiating successfully for Henry's medical coverage when his company downsized, teaching generations of children to find their voices through education. She had never been powerless. She had simply forgotten her power. On the eve of her scheduled discharge, Martha stood at the hospital window watching a spring storm roll in from the Atlantic. Lightning illuminated the harbor in brilliant flashes, followed by rumbling thunder that seemed to echo her gathering resolve. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, perhaps the most difficult of her life. But for the first time in 2 years, Martha Wilson was prepared to fight for her freedom and reclaim the life that had been stolen from her, one manipulated signature at a time. The morning of Martha's discharge dawned with deceptive tranquility, soft spring light filtering through the hospital blinds, the distant cry of gulls from the harbor, the reassuring rhythm of the hospital awakening for another day. Martha had slept poorly, her mind cycling through the confrontation to come, rehearsing words that needed to be said after years of enforced silence. Linda arrived precisely at 9 a.m., as predictable as the tide, bearing a designer tote bag containing clothes for Martha's departure. "I brought your blue cardigan, Mother. The one you always say doesn't itch." Her voice carried the practiced cheer of someone speaking to a child, a tone Martha now recognized as part of the ongoing infantilization that had characterized their relationship for 2 years. "Thank you, dear," Martha replied, accepting the neatly folded garments while activating the recording function on her concealed phone, exactly as Emily had instructed. "You're always so thoughtful." Linda preened at the compliment, setting her handbag on the visitor's chair and extracting a folder bulging with documents. "I brought the discharge paperwork for you to sign. Dr. Roberts has already approved everything, and I've scheduled a visit to Riverview Estates for tomorrow. Just to tour the facilities, of course. No pressure." Martha nodded, the gesture non-committal. "Before we deal with paperwork, Linda, I'd like to discuss something important." Linda's smile remained fixed, but wariness crept into her eyes. "Of course, Mother. What is it?" "I've been thinking about my finances," Martha began, watching her daughter's expression closely. "Since I'll be making this transition to assisted living, I should really understand my current financial situation." Linda's perfectly manicured hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the folder. "You know finances stress you out, Mother. That's why we agreed I would handle everything. Did we agree?" "I don't actually recall that conversation." "Well, you were having a difficult time after Daddy died." Linda's voice took on a practiced, patient tone. "You were signing checks twice, forgetting to pay bills. It was for your own protection." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "That might explain temporary help with bill paying, but it doesn't explain why my teacher's pension has been redirected to an account I can't access, or why Henry's life insurance proceeds have disappeared, or why there's a new mortgage on a house that was fully paid for." The silence that followed felt like the moment before a thunderclap, charged and expectant. Linda's smile faltered, then reassembled itself with visible effort. "Mother, you're confused again. This is exactly why we need to simplify your life." She reached for the call button. "Let me get the nurse to bring your medication." Martha moved the call button out of reach. "I'm not confused, Linda. For the first time in 2 years, I'm seeing with complete clarity, you've been systematically stealing from me while keeping me drugged and isolated." "That's absurd!" Linda's voice rose sharply. "I've sacrificed everything to take care of you. My time, my energy, my resources, all to make sure you're safe and comfortable." "Safe and comfortable," Martha repeated quietly. "Is that how you'd describe my condition when I arrived at the hospital, with an infection so severe it had entered my bloodstream, with medications in my system that were actively harming me?" Linda's composure cracked further, her carefully cultivated image of the devoted daughter beginning to fracture under direct confrontation. "You're twisting everything. I've only ever acted in your best interest." "Then you won't mind explaining a few things," Martha continued steadily, drawing strength from the knowledge that every word was being recorded. "Why have you been telling my friends I'm too confused to have visitors? Why have you installed surveillance cameras throughout my home? Why am I not permitted to leave the house alone?" "Because you're not well." Linda's voice had abandoned its soothing register, sharpening with frustration. "You had a stroke, Mother. You're not capable of making sound decisions anymore." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway, "Mrs. Wilson is perfectly capable of making her own decisions." Dr. Patel entered the room, followed by Dr. Levine and Patricia Reynolds. The assembled medical authority created an immediate shift in the room's power dynamic, with Linda physically retreating a step. "Mrs. Wilson's cognitive assessment shows no significant impairment," Dr. Levine stated, consulting his clipboard. Her confusion and memory issues were consistent with side effects from her medication regimen, a regimen that appears medically inappropriate for her condition. Linda's gaze darted between the healthcare professionals, calculation replacing outrage. "Dr. Roberts has been overseeing my mother's care for years. He understands her condition better than doctors who've only known her for a week." "Speaking of Dr. Roberts," Dr. Patel interjected, "the hospital ethics committee has some serious concerns about his involvement in your mother's case. The medication dosages he prescribed are outside standard geriatric protocols, and his insistence on premature discharge despite clear medical contraindications raises troubling questions." Linda's retreat continued, both physically and psychologically, as she backed toward her handbag. "This is ridiculous. I'm taking my mother home today as planned." "I have power of attorney and medical directive authority." "About that," Patricia Reynolds said, producing a document from her folder, "we've filed an emergency petition to suspend your power of attorney pending investigation of financial exploitation and medical neglect. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." The color drained from Linda's face, her carefully constructed world visibly collapsing around her. "You can't do that. Those documents are legally binding." "They are," Patricia agreed, "unless obtained through coercion or executed when the grantor lacked capacity. Both circumstances we believe apply here." Linda's eyes narrowed as she regrouped, years of corporate negotiation serving her well in this moment of crisis. "This is a family matter that's being grossly misinterpreted by outsiders. My mother has been declining for years." One lucid week doesn't erase 2 years of documented cognitive issues. "Issues that mysteriously coincide with the medication regimen you and Dr. Roberts implemented," Dr. Patel noted. "Mrs. Wilson's mental clarity has improved dramatically since we adjusted her medications." Martha watched the exchange with a strange sense of detachment, as if observing a play where she knew the ending but was still fascinated by how the plot would unfold. This confrontation had lived in her imagination for months, yet the reality was both more mundane and more devastating than she had envisioned. "Linda," she said finally, drawing all eyes back to her, "I want to understand. You're my daughter. I changed your diapers, kissed your scraped knees, stayed up all night when you had chicken pox. I worked extra tutoring jobs to pay for your dance lessons. Your father and I remortgaged our house to send you to that private college you insisted on. How could you do this to me?" For a moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across Linda's perfect features, a glimpse of the wounded child beneath the predatory adult. "You were always so perfect," she whispered, the words seemingly extracted against her will. "The beloved teacher everyone admired, the devoted wife, Michael's adoring mother." "I loved you just as much as Michael," Martha said softly. "No, you didn't." Linda's voice hardened again. He was always first, your brilliant son following in your footsteps. Do you know how many of his school events you missed because you were busy with other people's children? How many times Dad had to take me to dance recitals alone because Mrs. Wilson couldn't possibly disappoint her students? The accusation landed like a physical blow. There was enough truth embedded in it to sting, to reawaken old guilt about work-life balance that had plagued Martha throughout her teaching career. I made mistakes, Martha acknowledged. Oh, all parents do. But Linda, nothing justifies what you've done. Drugging me, isolating me, stealing my life savings. I deserve that money. Linda's control shattered completely, her voice rising to a near shout. All those years of being second best, of watching you lavish attention on Michael and your precious students. Then Michael dies, and suddenly he's sanctified, the perfect son forever preserved in memory while I'm still here, still not enough. The raw pain in her daughter's voice momentarily staggered Martha. Had she truly been so blind to Linda's suffering? Had her love for Michael inadvertently wounded her daughter beyond healing? And then, Linda continued, bitterness dripping from every word, then you had the audacity to get sick, to need me after years of not being there when I needed you. So yes, I took control. Yes, I made decisions. Someone had to clean up the mess you left behind. Dr. Patel moved toward the door. I think we should take a break. This conversation is becoming counterproductive. No, Martha said firmly. I need to hear this. I need to understand. Linda's laugh held no humor. Understand? Now you want to understand? It's a little late for that, Mother. 20 years too late. The conversation might have continued its destructive spiral if not for an unexpected interruption, a sharp knock followed by the appearance of a security officer at the door. Dr. Patel, the individual you reported has been located in the hospital pharmacy. Dr. Patel exchanged glances with Dr. Levine. Dr. Roberts? The officer nodded. He was attempting to access Mrs. Wilson's medication orders. Hospital administration is speaking with him now. This news seemed to penetrate Linda's anger, replacing rage with calculation once more. I need to make some calls, she announced abruptly, reaching for her handbag. This situation has clearly spiraled out of control. Before you go, Linda, Martha said quietly, there's someone you should meet. She nodded toward the door where Emily now stood, no longer in scrubs, but dressed professionally in a simple blazer and slacks, her resemblance to Michael unmistakable in the set of her jaw and the directness of her gaze. Linda froze, her eyes widening with recognition despite never having met the young woman. Who is this? This is Emily Wilson, Martha said. Your niece. Michael's daughter. Linda's gaze darted between them, disbelief warring with dawning comprehension. Michael didn't have children. He did, Emily confirmed, stepping into the room. He just didn't know about me until shortly before his death. I've been trying to contact my grandmother for 2 years, ever since you told me she was too fragile to handle meeting me. The revelation landed like the final devastating blow in an already brutal confrontation. Linda's carefully constructed narrative, the devoted daughter sacrificing for her declining mother, crumbled completely in the face of this new witness to her deception. You kept her from me, Martha whispered, the full weight of this particular betrayal threatening to crush her. My own granddaughter. The last piece of Michael in this world? How could you? Linda's expression hardened into something unrecognizable, a stranger wearing her daughter's face. This changes nothing. I still have legal authority over your affairs. Not anymore, Emily replied, her professional demeanor belying her youth. The emergency guardianship hearing tomorrow will include evidence I've been gathering for months. Financial records showing systematic theft, medical documentation of inappropriate medication, witness statements regarding your isolation of my grandmother." She produced a USB drive from her pocket, "including recordings of your conversations with Dr. Roberts discussing how to maintain my grandmother's compliance through medication." Linda's gaze fixed on the small device with naked horror. "You've been spying on me? That's illegal." "Actually," Emily countered, "recording conversations you're a party to is perfectly legal in Maine. I should know. I'm specializing in elder law." The room fell silent as Linda visibly calculated her remaining options. Finally, her shoulders straightened, corporate training reasserting itself in crisis. "You won't win this," she said coldly. "I have resources, connections. By the time I'm finished, everyone will believe Martha Wilson is a confused old woman being manipulated by opportunistic strangers." "Except I'm not confused," Martha replied steadily. "And I'm not alone anymore." For a moment longer, mother and daughter locked eyes across an unbridgeable divide, not just the hospital room, but the chasm of broken trust and revealed character that no reconciliation could fully repair. Then Linda gathered her belongings with precise movements, her mask of control firmly back in place. "We'll settle this in court," she announced, brushing past Emily without acknowledgement. At the doorway, she paused, turning back with a smile that chilled Martha to the bone. "Enjoy your victory today, Mother. But remember, I'm still the executor of your will, still your next of kin. One setback doesn't end the game." After Linda's departure, the room seemed to exhale collectively. Patricia Reynolds checked her watch. "The hospital attorney will be filing the emergency paperwork within the hour. Until the hearing tomorrow, Mrs. Wilson remains under hospital care." "What happens now?" Martha asked, feeling suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline of confrontation draining away to leave her hollow. "Now," Emily said, taking her grandmother's hand, "we prepare to win back your life." Throughout the afternoon, Martha's hospital room transformed into an impromptu war room. Patricia Reynolds coordinated with Adult Protective Services, compiling documentation of neglect and financial exploitation. Dr. Patel and Dr. Levine prepared medical statements detailing the inappropriate medication regimen and its cognitive effects. Emily organized financial records, creating a clear timeline of Linda's systematic looting of Martha's assets. Rosie Sullivan arrived bearing sandwiches and determination. "Half the town is ready to testify on your behalf," she reported. "Your former principal, 3 school board members, at least a dozen former students, all willing to speak about your competence and character." As evening approached, Martha found herself unexpectedly tearful, overwhelmed by the network of support that had materialized around her. "I don't deserve all this effort," she murmured to Emily as they reviewed paperwork together. "Of course you do," Emily replied without hesitation. "And it's not just for you. It's for every elderly person who's been manipulated and exploited. It's for Dad, who would be fighting just as hard if he were here." She squeezed Martha's hand. "It's for family, real family, that protects rather than preys upon its vulnerable members." Martha studied her granddaughter's face, marveling at the echoes of Michael she could see there. His determination, his sense of justice, his unflinching courage. "You're so much like him." "So everyone tells me," Emily smiled. "I wish I'd had more time with him." "We'll make up for lost time," Martha promised. "Both of us." As night settled over the hospital, Martha stood at the window watching the lighthouse beams sweep across the harbor, steady, reliable, a guide through darkness. Tomorrow would bring the legal battle that would determine her future. But tonight, surrounded by allies and armed with truth, Martha Wilson reclaimed something she had lost 2 years ago. Hope. Martha awoke early the morning of the guardianship hearing, her body tense with anticipation despite the hospital bed's attempts at comfort. Outside her window, Seaside Haven was coming to life. Fishing boats heading out to sea, the bakery's lights glowing warm against the pre-dawn gray, shopkeepers preparing for another day. The ordinariness of the scene struck her as strangely poignant. While her life hung in the balance, the world continued its reliable rhythms. Emily arrived at 7, carrying a garment bag and a determined expression. "I brought some options for today," she explained, hanging the bag in the small closet. "Nothing says competent and independent like looking put together." Martha smiled gratefully. Linda had only brought casual clothes for discharge, items that would reinforce the image of a frail, confused woman needing care. Emily's foresight in bringing professional attire represented another small battle in the larger war for Martha's dignity. The navy blue dress Emily selected fit well enough, despite Martha's recent weight loss. A cashmere cardigan added warmth and a touch of elegance. As Emily helped style her grandmother's silver hair, carefully working around the healing areas of her scalp, Martha studied their reflection in the bathroom mirror, grandmother and granddaughter, the Wilson features evident in both faces. "I keep thinking about your mother," Martha said softly. "She should be part of this too." Emily's hands stilled momentarily. "Mom passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. That's what prompted me to find Dad. I realized life's too short for missed connections." Another loss, another grief Martha hadn't been permitted to know or process. The weight of these stolen years pressed heavily upon her heart. Dr. Patel arrived to conduct a final assessment before the hearing, her manner professional but warm. "Your physical recovery is proceeding well, Mrs. Wilson. The infection is responding to treatment, and your latest blood work shows significant improvement." "And my mental status?" Martha asked, knowing this would be central to the day's proceedings. "Your cognitive function tests continue to show age-appropriate responses, with no indication of impairment that would prevent you from managing your own affairs." Dr. Patel hesitated, then added more personally, "For what it's worth, Mrs. Wilson, I've treated thousands of patients in my career. You display more clarity and sound judgment than many people half your age." The hospital attorney arrived next, Catherine Bennett, a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s, whose no-nonsense demeanor reminded Martha of her former school principal. "The hearing is scheduled for 10 o'clock at the county courthouse," she explained, reviewing documents from her briefcase. "Judge Eleanor Harmon will be presiding. She's experienced in elder law matters and has a reputation for cutting through manipulation tactics." "What should I expect?" Martha asked, anxiety fluttering in her stomach despite her resolve. "Linda's attorney will attempt to paint you as confused and vulnerable," Catherine replied straightforwardly. "They'll highlight the stroke, emphasize any memory lapses, and present Linda as the devoted daughter protecting her mother from herself. Our job is to demonstrate that your cognitive abilities are intact, that the documented confusion resulted from inappropriate medication, and that Linda has systematically exploited her position of trust for financial gain." At 9:30, a hospital orderly arrived with a wheelchair, standard protocol for patient transport. Martha initially balked, not wanting to appear frail at the courthouse, but Catherine Bennett shook her head. "Hospital policy for liability reasons. Once we arrive, you'll walk into the courtroom on your own 2 feet." The morning was clear and cool as they exited the hospital, spring sunshine warming Martha's face after too many days indoors. Emily helped her from the wheelchair into Catherine's sedan, and they joined the light morning traffic heading toward the county courthouse in the neighboring town of Harborview. Martha watched the familiar landscape pass by her window, the coastal road winding past beaches still empty in the off-season, the salt marshes where she had once taken her students for science lessons, the turn-off to Lighthouse Road where her home stood. Her home. The thought sent a pang through her chest. Was it still her home? Or had Linda already emptied it of memories, sanitized it for sale to strangers? The Harborview County Courthouse imposed its granite dignity on the town square, its steps already populated with the day's business, lawyers consulting with clients, courthouse staff hurrying with coffee cups, citizens arriving for jury duty or hearings of their own. As promised, Martha walked up those steps unassisted, Emily at her side, back straight despite the lingering weakness from her hospitalization. In the cool marble hallway outside courtroom C, Martha spotted Linda deep in conversation with a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, clearly her attorney and clearly expensive. Linda herself looked impeccable as always, dressed conservatively in a cream-colored sheath dress that projected both authority and demure respect for the proceedings. Their eyes met briefly across the hallway, Linda's gaze coolly assessing before deliberately turning away. More surprisingly, Dr. James Roberts stood nearby, his normally confident posture diminished, his expression troubled. Nay, he appeared to be arguing quietly with a younger man Martha didn't recognize, perhaps his own attorney, given the circumstances. "Dr. Roberts is under investigation by the medical board," Emily murmured, following Martha's gaze. "The hospital filed a complaint regarding his medication practices, and it turns out you're not the only elderly patient with troubling prescription patterns under his care." The courtroom doors opened precisely at 10, and the assembled parties filed in. Martha felt a surge of gratitude at the sight of familiar faces in the gallery. Rosie Sullivan, front and center, Patricia Reynolds from Social Services, Nurse Jenkins, even Martha's former principal, Richard Thomas, now well into his 70s but still ramrod straight and supportive. Judge Eleanor Harmon entered, a formidable woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they landed upon. "Be seated," she instructed, arranging papers before her. "This is an emergency guardianship hearing in the matter of Martha Wilson. I've reviewed the filings from both parties." Her gaze swept the courtroom. "This is not a criminal proceeding, but I will remind everyone that I expect complete honesty and decorum. My sole concern is Mrs. Wilson's welfare and determining whether she requires guardianship protection, and if so, from whom." Linda's attorney rose first, introducing himself as Harrison Wells, a name Martha recognized from regional news coverage of high-profile cases. "Your Honor, this matter is straightforward. Martha Wilson suffered a stroke 2 years ago that impaired her cognitive function. Her daughter Linda Prescott has provided dedicated care since that time, managing her mother's financial and medical affairs through properly executed power of attorney and medical directive documents. This sudden challenge to those legal arrangements is based on a temporary period of lucidity that does not reflect Mrs. Wilson's ongoing cognitive challenges." Catherine Bennett countered immediately. "Your Honor, what Mr. Wells characterizes as dedicated care was in fact a systematic campaign of isolation, inappropriate medication, and financial exploitation. Mrs. Wilson's current clarity isn't temporary. It's her natural state when not impaired by unnecessarily high doses of sedatives and anti-anxiety medications prescribed by Dr. Roberts at Ms. Prescott's request." Judge Harmon listened impassively to both openings, then addressed Martha directly. "Mrs. Wilson, since this hearing concerns your capacity, I'd like to hear from you first. Do you understand why we're here today?" Martha rose, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. We're here to determine whether I'm capable of managing my own affairs or whether I need a guardian to make decisions for me." "And what is your position on this matter?" "I believe I am fully capable of managing my own affairs, Your Honor. The confusion and memory issues I've experienced over the past 2 years were side effects of medication, not symptoms of cognitive decline." Judge Harmon nodded, making a note. "Mr. Wells, call your first witness." Linda took the stand, the picture of filial devotion in her carefully selected outfit and concerned expression. Under her attorney's gentle questioning, she painted a compelling narrative, the dedicated daughter who had put her own life on hold to care for an increasingly confused mother, the responsible steward who had managed complicated finances when Martha could no longer do so, the loving child protecting her parent from exploitation. Mother would forget to eat unless reminded, Linda testified, her voice catching with practiced emotion. She would leave burners on, lose track of conversations mid-sentence. After the stroke, she was simply not the same person. "And the financial management you undertook?" Mr. Wells prompted. "Was that at Mrs. Wilson's request?" "Of course," Linda replied smoothly. "Mother recognized her limitations. She asked me to handle everything so she wouldn't have to worry." Catherine Bennett's cross-examination cut through the carefully constructed image. "Miss Prescott, can you explain why, if you were acting in your mother's best interest, you transferred over $850,000 from her accounts to your own over the past 2 years?" Linda's composure flickered briefly. "Those transfers were for household expenses, medical costs, and investments made on Mother's behalf." "Investments like your vacation home in the Bahamas? Or perhaps the luxury vehicle purchased 6 months ago? Neither of which your mother has ever used or benefited from?" "Objection!" Harrison Wells interjected. "Counsel is making accusations without evidence." "I have bank records documenting every transfer," Catherine countered, producing a thick folder, "and property records confirming the purchases." Judge Harmon reviewed the documents with a deepening frown. "Overruled. The witness will answer the question." Linda's perfect facade cracked slightly. "Those purchases were made with my own funds. The transfers from Mother's accounts were for her care." "Then perhaps you can explain," Catherine continued relentlessly, "why your mother's house, previously owned free and clear, now carries a $450,000 mortgage taken out 14 months ago, with the proceeds deposited directly into your personal account?" The questioning continued in this vein, with each of Linda's explanations unraveling under the weight of documented evidence. When Dr. Roberts took the stand next, his testimony proved equally damaging to Linda's case. Under pressure from both the pending medical board investigation and possible criminal charges for medical fraud, he admitted to prescribing medication dosages he knew were inappropriate for Martha's condition. Miss Prescott insisted her mother needed stronger sedation to manage anxiety, he testified, unable to meet Martha's eyes across the courtroom. "I should have refused. I should have reported my concerns." "Why didn't you?" Judge Harmon asked directly. Dr. Roberts hesitated. "Financial pressures, poor judgment. Ms. Prescott made it worth my while to accommodate her requests." The admission sent a ripple through the courtroom. Martha felt Emily's hand tighten around hers, anger and vindication mingling in her granddaughter's grip. As the morning progressed, the case against Linda solidified with each witness. Medical experts testified to Martha's current cognitive clarity. Financial analysts detailed the systematic emptying of her accounts. Social services representatives described the hallmarks of elder abuse evident in her situation. By the lunch recess, Martha felt simultaneously vindicated and devastated. The public exposure of Linda's betrayal, witnessed by friends and neighbors in the gallery, brought both relief and profound grief. This was her daughter, her own flesh and blood, revealed as a predator who had calculated and executed a plan to steal her mother's final years of independence along with her life savings. When court resumed, Martha took the stand herself, feeling strangely calm despite the magnitude of the moment. She answered questions clearly and directly, demonstrating her awareness of financial matters, her understanding of her medical condition, and her plans for future independence. "Mrs. Wilson," Judge Harmon asked after both attorneys had finished their questioning, "if the court determines you do not require a guardian, What are your intentions regarding your daughter?" The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on Martha as she considered the question that cut to the heart of the matter. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of both judicial proceedings and maternal heartbreak. "I intend to press charges for financial exploitation, Your Honor. The money taken from me represents not just dollars but years of work by both myself and my late husband, our retirement security, the legacy we intended for our children and grandchildren." She paused, her gaze finding Linda's across the courtroom. "I say this not out of vengeance but out of responsibility to myself, to other vulnerable elders, and yes, even to Linda. Without consequences, without accountability, there can be no possibility of redemption." Linda's expression remained impassive, but Martha caught the slight widening of her eyes, surprised perhaps that the mother she had dismissed as weak and pliable had found such clarity of purpose. Judge Harmon's ruling came swiftly after final arguments. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented today, I am denying the petition for guardianship over Martha Wilson. Furthermore, I am immediately revoking all powers of attorney and medical directives currently held by Linda Prescott." She fixed Linda with a stern gaze. "Miss Prescott, this court is referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. You are ordered not to contact your mother except through legal counsel, and not to enter her property or access any of her financial accounts." The judge turned to Martha. "Mrs. Wilson, while you have demonstrated clear capacity to manage your own affairs, I recommend appointing a financial conservator temporarily to help recover misappropriated funds and restructure your accounts. Would that be acceptable to you?" "Yes, Your Honor," Martha agreed. "I believe that would be prudent." As the court adjourned, Martha felt a curious lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the weightlessness that comes when a long-carried burden is finally set down. The legal battle had been won, but the emotional war would continue. No judicial ruling could heal the wound of her daughter's betrayal or restore the years of independence that had been stolen from her. Outside the courthouse, Martha paused on the steps, taking a moment to absorb the spring sunshine and the first taste of true freedom in 2 years. Emily stood beside her, a solid presence representing both the future and the connection to Michael that Linda had tried to deny her. "What now, Grandma?" Emily asked softly. Martha gazed toward the harbor where boats moved gently on the tide, some returning home, others setting out on new journeys. "Now," she said with quiet determination, "we rebuild." The initial victory in court proved to be merely the first battle in a longer war. 3 days after the guardianship hearing, as Martha prepared to leave the hospital at last, Emily arrived with troubling news that cast a shadow over their hard-won freedom. "Linda's filed an emergency appeal," she explained, setting her briefcase on the hospital bed where Martha was carefully folding the clothes Emily had brought her throughout the week. "Her attorney is arguing that your medication changes in the hospital created a temporarily improved condition that doesn't reflect your baseline cognitive status." Martha's hands stilled on the soft fabric of a cardigan. "Can she do that?" "She can try," Emily replied, her jaw set in a determination that reminded Martha so powerfully of Michael that it made her heart ache. "More concerning is what's happening at your house." The words Martha had been dreading since discovering Linda's true intentions. "Tell me." "She's emptying it," Emily said bluntly. "A moving company arrived yesterday. Rosie called me when she saw the trucks. By the time I got there, they'd already loaded most of the furniture from the main floor." Martha sank onto the edge of the bed, the physical manifestation of Linda's betrayal hitting harder than the legal maneuvering. "My home." "I showed them the court order prohibiting Linda from removing assets, but the foreman said they were hired and paid by Linda's husband, not Linda herself, a legal loophole. They had documents showing he's a co-owner of the property." Martha shook her head in bewilderment. That's impossible. Richard's name was never on the deed. Henry and I owned the house outright for 15 years before he died. Emily's expression darkened. There's a new deed on file with the county. It shows transfer of the property to Linda and Richard Prescott 18 months ago, with you retaining a life interest only. The room seemed to tilt momentarily as Martha absorbed this new betrayal. Her home, the Colonial on Lighthouse Road, where she and Henry had raised their family, tended their garden, built their life together, legally stolen through documents she had either signed while medicated or that had been forged entirely. "Can we fight it?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "Absolutely," Emily assured her. "I've already contacted the forensic document specialist Catherine recommended. If your signature was forged or obtained under duress or diminished capacity, we can invalidate the transfer." She hesitated. "But legal battles take time, Grandma. In the meantime, I have nowhere to go," Martha finished, the reality of her situation crystallizing with brutal clarity. The hospital discharge, planned with such optimism just hours earlier, now loomed as a crisis rather than a celebration. "You can stay with me," Emily offered immediately. "My apartment in Portland isn't large, but—" "No," Martha interrupted gently. "You're finishing law school, preparing for the bar exam. The last thing you need is your grandmother underfoot." She straightened her shoulders, teacher mode activating automatically in crisis. "We'll figure something out." The solution came from an unexpected source. As Martha signed her discharge papers later that afternoon, Rosie Sullivan arrived with her characteristic whirlwind energy, dropping into the visitor's chair with the air of someone who had already solved the problem. "You're coming to stay with me," she announced without preamble. "I've got the entire second floor empty since my sister moved to Florida. Private bedroom, private bath, and I promise not to hover like a mother hen. Well, not much anyway." Martha looked up from the paperwork, touched beyond words. "Rosie, I couldn't impose—" "Impose? For heaven's sake, Martha Wilson, you saved me from flunking sophomore English in 1978. Consider it 45 years of overdue payback." Rosie's brisk tone softened slightly. "Besides, you need somewhere safe while the legal mess gets sorted, and I need someone to tell me when my new haircut looks ridiculous. It's practically a business arrangement." And so, 1 week after her fateful haircut appointment had exposed years of hidden abuse, Martha found herself returning to Rosie's Victorian home on Maple Street. Not as a client this time, but as a temporary resident. The symbolism wasn't lost on either woman. What began at Rosie's salon would continue under Rosie's roof, a cycle of protection and recovery. The second-floor apartment proved comfortable and, crucially, accessible without navigating stairs thanks to the chairlift Rosie had installed for her late mother years earlier. Martha found herself surrounded by Rosie's eclectic collection of vintage furniture, colorful art, and the pervasive scent of the aromatic oils she used in her salon treatments. "It's not the Ritz," Rosie apologized as she showed Martha around. "But it's clean and quiet, and nobody's going to be drugging your tea or monitoring your movements." "It's perfect," Martha assured her, genuinely touched by her friend's generosity. "I can't tell you what this means to me, Rosie." "You can thank me by getting better and getting your life back," Rosie replied gruffly. Emotional displays never her strong suit. "Starting with eating something that isn't hospital food." Dinner's at 6. That evening, Martha sat in Rosie's cheerful kitchen, savoring homemade clam chowder and fresh-baked bread, while going through the surprisingly extensive list of items Emily and Catherine Bennett had identified as urgent priorities. Changing bank accounts, securing medical records, filing insurance claims, documenting missing possessions, preparing for criminal proceedings against Linda. The administrative aftermath of exploitation proved almost as overwhelming as the exploitation itself. "One day at a time," Rosie advised, refilling Martha's water glass. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Linda's mess. It'll take time to untangle. Martha nodded, trying to focus on practical matters rather than the emotional devastation still threatening to overwhelm her in unguarded moments. "I keep thinking about my photo albums," she admitted. 35 years of memories, Michael's baby pictures, family vacations, Henry's retirement party. Are they sitting in some storage unit now? Thrown away? Sold at a garage sale? Rosie reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "We'll get them back, honey. The court order's clear. Linda can't dispose of your personal property." "If she even bothers to obey it," Martha replied, a bitterness she hardly recognized coloring her voice, "she's already proven she doesn't respect legal boundaries." Over the next several days, Martha's prediction proved painfully accurate. Despite the court order prohibiting asset transfers, Linda appeared to be systematically dismantling Martha's life, emptying the house on Lighthouse Road, closing joint accounts before they could be frozen, even canceling Martha's cell phone plan and credit cards. "She's scorching the earth," Catherine Bennett observed grimly during a strategy meeting in her office. "Making it as difficult as possible for you to re-establish independence." The aggressive tactics backfired, however, by providing additional evidence for both the appeal defense and the criminal case building against Linda. Each canceled account, each removed possession created a paper trail of defiance against court orders. By the end of the week, Judge Harmon had not only denied Linda's appeal, but had issued additional orders freezing all assets connected to the Wilson estate and appointing a forensic accountant to trace the misappropriated funds. Nevertheless, the psychological toll mounted. Martha found herself experiencing unexpected emotional aftershocks, waking from nightmares where Linda stood over her bed with pills, panicking briefly when Rosie was late returning from the salon, fearing that somehow Linda would find a way to resume control over her life. "Post-traumatic stress," explained Dr. Levine during Martha's follow-up appointment. "You lived under surveillance and chemical sedation for 2 years, Mrs. Wilson. Your brain is still processing that trauma and remains hypervigilant against perceived threats." "Will it get better?" Martha asked, hating the vulnerability in her voice. "With time and appropriate support, yes. I'd like you to consider therapy with someone specializing in recovery from family abuse and betrayal. There's a particular complexity to trauma inflicted by someone you should have been able to trust implicitly." Martha agreed, recognizing the wisdom in his suggestion even as part of her resisted the idea of dissecting her pain with a stranger. She had always been the helper, the fixer, the one others leaned on. Learning to accept support felt like navigating unfamiliar terrain without a map. 10 days after Martha's release from the hospital, the district attorney's office formally charged Linda Prescott with multiple felonies: elder abuse, financial exploitation, medication tampering, and fraud. Dr. James Roberts faced his own charges along with permanent revocation of his medical license by the state board. The news made regional headlines, with several media outlets reaching out to Martha for interviews. She steadfastly declined. "You don't owe them your story," Emily assured her over lunch at Seaside Haven's small cafe, their first public outing together, a milestone Martha had approached with both anticipation and anxiety. "The criminal case will proceed whether you speak to reporters or not." Martha nodded, still adjusting to being seen in public after months of isolation. She had noticed the sidelong glances from other diners, the whispered conversations behind menus. Seaside Haven was processing its own shock, not just at Linda's betrayal, but at the community's collective failure to recognize a vulnerable member being systematically abused in their midst. "I'm not concerned about the criminal case," Martha admitted, stirring her soup absently. "I'm worried about the house, all those missing possessions, the practical reality of starting over at 60. Emily covered her grandmother's hand with her own. "We'll keep fighting for the house. And as for starting over, You're not doing it alone." The words brought unexpected tears to Martha's eyes. Not alone. After 2 years of enforced isolation, the simple statement felt revolutionary. That afternoon, walking back to Rosie's house, Martha found herself taking a detour toward the harbor. The spring day had warmed considerably, with fishing boats bobbing gently at their moorings and tourists beginning to appear as the season shifted toward summer. She settled on a bench overlooking the water, watching seagulls wheel against the clear blue sky. Her phone chimed with a text message, still a novelty after Linda's tight control of her communications. It was from Patricia Reynolds at Social Services. "Good news! Judge Harmon has granted an emergency injunction preventing any further removal of items from Lighthouse Road property. Sheriff's deputies are posting notices now." A small victory, but significant. Martha texted back her thanks, then continued watching the harbor activity, finding unexpected peace in the rhythmic motion of the waves. Henry had loved this spot. They had often walked here in the evenings after dinner, planning their retirement, dreaming of the travels they would take when Martha finally stepped away from teaching. Those dreams had died with Henry, buried beneath grief and vulnerability and Linda's calculated exploitation. But perhaps new dreams could take their place, different, unexpected, but no less valuable. A shadow fell across the bench, and Martha looked up to find an older gentleman standing nearby, hat in hand, uncertainty written across his weathered features. "Mrs. Wilson? Martha Wilson? I'm sorry to disturb you. I'm Frank Delaney. You probably don't remember me." Martha studied him, memory clicking into place. "Of course I remember you, Mr. Delaney. Your daughter Sophie was in my 4th grade class about 20 years ago. She did that wonderful science project on tidal pools." Frank Delaney's face lit up. "That's right. She's a marine biologist now down in North Carolina. She credits you with sparking her interest in ocean science." The simple connection, teacher to student, parent to teacher, warmed Martha in a way nothing else had since her ordeal began. This was who she had been before Linda's interference, a respected educator, a community member whose influence rippled outward through generations of students. "I read about what happened to you," Frank continued more soberly. "That business with your daughter. Terrible thing." He hesitated. "Sophie asked me to give you this when I told her I'd seen you in town." He handed Martha an envelope, slightly wrinkled from being carried in a pocket. Inside was a card bearing a handwritten note. "Mrs. Wilson, you may not remember me, but I've never forgotten you. You were the teacher who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, who stayed after school to help me understand fractions, who came to my science fair when my parents were working double shifts. I just wanted you to know that your impact extends far beyond anything your daughter could ever take from you. There are hundreds of us out here, your students, carrying pieces of your wisdom and kindness into the world. With gratitude and support, Sophie Delaney, Ph.D., Class of 2003. Martha read the note twice, tears welling despite her best efforts to contain them. Frank Delaney shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure whether to remain or politely withdraw in the face of her emotion. "Thank you for bringing this," Martha said finally, carefully returning the card to its envelope. "It means more than I can express. Sophie said to tell you there's a whole group of your former students organizing to help however they can, setting up a fund for legal expenses, offering to help retrieve your belongings when the courts allow it. Just say the word." After Frank departed, Martha remained on the bench, Sophie's card clutched in her hand like a talisman against despair. The realization settled over her with gentle certainty. Linda had stolen her money, her home, her possessions, but she could never erase the legacy Martha had built through decades of teaching, through lives touched and minds shaped. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the harbor, Martha Wilson made a decision. She would not allow Linda's betrayal to define her remaining years. She would reclaim not just her legal rights and financial assets, but her identity as educator, community member, and now, most precious of all, grandmother. The path forward would be difficult, fraught with legal battles and emotional landmines. The relationship with her daughter was irreparably shattered, a loss she would grieve alongside the material possessions that might never be recovered. But sitting on that harbor bench, surrounded by the community that had finally recognized her plight and rallied to her defense, Martha found the beginning of something she had thought forever lost: hope. Her phone chimed again, Emily this time. Good news. Document examiner confirms signatures on property transfer were forged. Filing motion to invalidate tomorrow. Coming to Rosie's at 7 to discuss. Bringing dinner. Martha smiled, typing back, perfect. I'll be home by then. Home. Not her house on Lighthouse Road, not yet, but surrounded by people who genuinely cared for her welfare. Martha was beginning to understand that home might be less about the physical structure and more about the freedom to be herself, unmedicated and unmonitored, making her own choices with clear-eyed dignity. For the first time since that fateful day in Rosie's salon when her secret suffering had been exposed, Martha felt the weight of victimhood beginning to lift. In its place grew a quiet determination to transform her personal tragedy into something meaningful, not just for herself, but for other vulnerable elders facing similar exploitation. The reckoning with Linda had only just begun. The battle for justice would be long and painful. But as Martha rose from the harbor bench, turning toward Rosie's house with purpose in her step, she carried with her the certainty that truth, once revealed, could never be hidden again. 3 months later, Martha Wilson stood on the familiar porch of the white colonial on Lighthouse Road, key in hand, heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation in equal measure. The summer breeze carried the scent of salt water and the distant cries of gulls, the soundtrack of her life in Seaside Haven for over 3 decades. Behind her, Emily and Rosie waited patiently, giving her this moment to cross the threshold on her own terms. "Ready?" Emily asked gently when Martha hesitated. Martha nodded, sliding the key into the lock with a hand that trembled only slightly. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing the entryway that had once welcomed countless students, colleagues, and friends before Linda had systematically isolated her from her community. The house felt both familiar and foreign, the architectural bones unchanged, but the soul of the place altered by Linda's predatory occupation. Many furnishings had been returned following the court order, but they sat differently now, as if the memory of their removal had changed their relationship to the space. Some treasured items remained missing, either sold or hidden in storage units the authorities had yet to locate. "It's so empty," Martha murmured, moving through the living room where bookshelves stood partially filled, family photographs conspicuously absent. "We'll fill it again," Emily assured her, setting down the suitcase containing the few possessions Martha had accumulated during her stay at Rosie's. One room at a time. The journey to this homecoming had been arduous. The legal battle over the property deed had consumed weeks of court appearances and forensic document examination before Judge Harmon finally invalidated the fraudulent transfer, returning full ownership to Martha. Linda's criminal case moved more slowly through the justice system, with a trial date still months away. But the frozen accounts had been released, missing funds partially recovered, and most importantly, Martha's independence legally re-established beyond challenge. Physical recovery had progressed alongside the legal victories. The fungal infection had finally cleared completely, leaving only faint scarring hidden beneath Martha's now healthy silver hair. Regular physical therapy had restored strength, diminished by months of sedentary confinement. Proper nutrition replaced the restricted diet Linda had imposed under the guise of health concerns. The emotional healing proved more challenging. Martha still startled at unexpected sounds, still checked her food and medication with habitual suspicion, still awoke sometimes in the grip of nightmares where Linda stood over her with pills that would steal her consciousness. Doctor. Sandra Miller, the therapist specializing in elder abuse recovery, assured Martha these responses were normal, expected, and would gradually diminish with time and continued support. "The house feels like it's holding its breath," Rosie observed as they completed their initial walkthrough. "Like it's waiting to see what happens next." Martha nodded, understanding exactly what her friend meant. The home felt suspended between past trauma and future possibility, just as she herself sometimes felt caught between the person she had been before Linda's betrayal and whoever she was becoming in its aftermath. That evening, after Rosie had returned to her own home and Emily had settled into the guest room that would soon be furnished as her permanent space, Martha sat alone on the porch swing Henry had hung 25 years earlier. The familiar creak of its chains provided a comforting rhythm as darkness settled over the neighborhood. Lights glowed in windows up and down Lighthouse Road, families preparing dinner, watching television, living their ordinary lives. Martha's phone chimed with an incoming text, still a novelty after years of Linda's communication controls. It was from Patricia Reynolds. "Thinking of you on your first night home. Remember, recovery isn't linear. Be gentle with yourself." The simple message brought unexpected tears. Throughout her ordeal, Martha had discovered a capacity for gratitude that somehow coexisted alongside her pain. Gratitude for Rosie's unflinching support, for Emily's determined advocacy, for the community that had eventually rallied around her, and for professionals like Patricia, who continued to guide her journey toward restoration. The legal proceedings had revealed the full extent of Linda's betrayal. Not just the financial exploitation and medical manipulation, but the deliberate alienation of Martha from anyone who might have noticed her deteriorating condition. Linda had systematically intercepted phone calls, discarded mail, and told concerned friends that Martha was too confused for visitors. She had created a perfect isolation chamber, ensuring no one could witness the gradually increasing medication or Martha's resulting disorientation. Dr. Roberts had eventually accepted a plea bargain, surrendering his medical license permanently in exchange for testimony against Linda. His statement to the court had been damning. Ms. Prescott specifically requested medication that would make her mother compliant and sedated. When I expressed concerns about side effects, she assured me she was monitoring her mother closely and would report any adverse reactions. The revelation of calculated harm by her own daughter still had the power to steal Martha's breath. In her darkest moments, she questioned what she might have done differently as a parent, what seeds of resentment she might have unknowingly planted that had grown into such poisonous fruit. Dr. Miller gently but firmly redirected such thoughts. "Nothing justifies elder abuse, Martha. Linda made choices as an adult that reflect her character, not your parenting." As twilight deepened into full darkness, Martha reluctantly rose from the porch swing and returned inside, carefully locking the door, a habit born of newly acquired caution rather than the paranoia Linda had cultivated. The house creaked and settled around her, familiar sounds that had once provided comfort now requiring reinterpretation through the lens of her changed circumstances. In the kitchen, she found Emily preparing tea, the domesticity of the scene both ordinary and extraordinary. How strange that this granddaughter, unknown to her just months ago, now felt more like family than the daughter she had raised from infancy. "I set up the security system," Emily reported, handing Martha a steaming mug. "Not because we need to worry, but because it might help you sleep better." Martha accepted both the tea and the thoughtfulness behind it. "Will you be all right here? It's not exactly the exciting life a law student might want." Emily smiled, the expression so reminiscent of Michael that it created a bittersweet ache in Martha's chest. "I can commute to Portland for classes. Besides, my lease is up next month, and Maine housing prices are ridiculous. We're helping each other." They sat together at the kitchen table. The original table Linda had removed, now replaced by a second-hand find from a local antique shop. Different, but serving the same purpose. Martha was beginning to accept that much of her reclaimed life would follow this pattern, replacements and substitutions creating a new normal that honored the past without being constrained by it. "I've been thinking," Martha said, cupping her hands around the warm mug, "about what comes next." Emily looked up with interest. "What do you mean?" "I can't go back to teaching. That chapter is closed. But what happened to me? It's happening to others. Elderly people being exploited by family members or caregivers. People without an Emily or a Rosie to advocate for them." Martha had spent her recuperation researching elder abuse statistics, horrified to discover the prevalence of financial exploitation and neglect among America's aging population. She had been struck particularly by how many victims, like herself, never reported their abuse due to shame, fear, or simple lack of recognition that what they were experiencing qualified as abuse. "Patricia mentioned that Seaside County has no dedicated support group for elder abuse survivors," Martha continued. "No specialized resources for people rebuilding their lives after exploitation." Emily's eyes brightened with understanding. "You're thinking of starting something." "More than thinking," Martha admitted. "I've already spoken with Richard Thomas, my former principal. He's on the community center board now. They have space available twice a month, and he thinks the center might even provide a small grant for materials and refreshments." "Grandma, that's perfect," Emily said, reaching across the table to squeeze Martha's hand. "Using your experience to help others." "It might help me as much as anyone else," Martha acknowledged. "Dr. Miller says finding purpose is essential to recovery from trauma. And teaching has always been my calling, just in a different classroom now." The following weeks unfolded in a rhythm of rebuilding, both the physical home and Martha's place within the community. Former students appeared bearing casseroles and offers of assistance. Neighbors stopped by with houseplants and welcome home cards. The local newspaper ran a tasteful feature on elder abuse awareness, with Martha providing insights without directly discussing her personal ordeal. The first meeting of the Seaside Haven Elder Support Network drew 7 participants to the community center. A modest beginning, but more than Martha had dared hope for. She had prepared carefully, working with Patricia Reynolds to develop resources and discussion topics that would be both practical and emotionally supportive. "I'm not a therapist or a lawyer," Martha told the small circle of attendees, most of whom were visibly nervous. "I'm simply someone who has walked this path and believes no one should have to walk it alone." By the meeting's end, tears had been shed, experiences shared, and a tentative sense of community established among people united by experiences they had previously suffered in isolation. As Martha gathered her materials afterward, an elderly gentleman approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Wilson, I just wanted to say, hearing your story, knowing you got your life back, it gives me hope." The simple statement affirmed what Martha had begun to suspect, that her greatest contribution might not be the teacher she had been, but the survivor she had become. Summer faded into autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and the annual transformation of New England foliage. Martha's case against Linda proceeded through the justice system with the methodical pace characteristic of legal proceedings. The preliminary hearing had produced enough evidence for the case to move forward to trial, with Linda maintaining her innocence despite the mountain of documentation proving otherwise. Martha had seen her daughter only once since the guardianship hearing, a chance encounter at the grocery store that had left both women momentarily frozen in the produce section, separated by 3 feet of physical space and an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal. Linda had recovered first, lifting her chin with defiance before turning her shopping cart and walking away without a word. The encounter had shaken Martha more than she cared to admit. That night, sitting on her porch watching the October sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and crimson, she had allowed herself to fully grieve, not just for the material losses Linda had inflicted, but for the mother-daughter relationship permanently destroyed by exploitation and abuse. "It's like a death," she explained to Dr. Miller during their weekly session, "except there's no funeral, no closure, just this ongoing legal battle and the knowledge that my own child saw me as nothing more than a resource to be drained." "Have you considered what you'll do if Linda is convicted?" Dr. Miller asked. "How you'll feel seeing her sentenced?" Martha had pondered this question often as the trial date approached. "I thought I wanted vengeance at first," she admitted, "but now I just want justice. Not only for myself, but for every elderly person who's been exploited by someone they trusted. Linda needs consequences, not to punish her, but to establish that what she did was profoundly wrong." As October gave way to November, Martha celebrated her 61st birthday with a small gathering at the house on Lighthouse Road. Emily and Rosie, of course, but also Patricia Reynolds, several former colleagues, and members of the support group that had grown to 15 regular participants. The dining room table that had sat empty for so long under Linda's watch now held plates of food, glasses of wine, and the animated conversation of people who genuinely cared for one another. "A toast," Richard Thomas announced, raising his glass. "To Martha Wilson, teacher, friend, advocate, and the most resilient woman I know." "To Martha," the group echoed, glasses raised in celebration of not just another year of life, but of a life reclaimed from the shadows of abuse and isolation. Later, after the guests had departed and Emily had gone to bed, Martha stood at the living room window watching the first snowflakes of the season begin their gentle descent. The garden Henry had lovingly tended lay dormant now, waiting for spring's renewal. Martha had spent the fall planting bulbs, daffodils and tulips that would emerge months from now, a commitment to a future she once again believed she would live to see. In the quiet of her reclaimed home, Martha Wilson reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple haircut and evolved into a complete reconstruction of her life. The painful parts remained painful. Linda's betrayal would never cease to hurt. The missing treasures would always be mourned. The time lost could never be recovered. But alongside the losses had come unexpected gifts. The discovery of Emily, the deepening of friendships, the creation of a purpose that transformed personal tragedy into community resource. Martha touched the frame of a newly discovered photograph. Michael, at his college graduation, beaming with pride as Martha and Henry stood on either side of him. The picture had been found in a box in the attic, overlooked in Linda's systematic looting of the house. Its rediscovery felt symbolic somehow, a reminder that not everything precious had been lost. Outside, the snow fell more heavily now, transforming Seaside Haven into a scene from a winter postcard. Martha watched the flakes swirl and dance in the glow of the street lamps, each one unique, fragile, and yet part of something larger and more enduring than itself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the ongoing legal battle, the continuing work of recovery, the never-ending process of rebuilding a life stripped to its foundations. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, Martha Wilson stood firmly in the knowledge that she had survived not just exploitation and abuse, but the far more insidious attempt to erase her identity and agency. The woman who had entered Rosie's hair salon 9 months ago, diminished, confused, literally and figuratively wounded, had emerged transformed, not unchanged, certainly not unscarred, but stronger in the broken places, more determined because of the challenges overcome. Martha turned from the window and moved through her home, turning off lights, checking locks, simple routines that once again belonged to her alone. In the hallway, she paused beside the small table where she now kept her most treasured new possession. A plane ticket to Rome, departure date set for April, the first stop on the European tour she and Henry had planned for their retirement. Emily would accompany her now instead. Different circumstances, different companion, but the dream itself finally being realized. As Martha prepared for bed, she thought of the support group members who had shared their stories that afternoon, each one finding voice and validation in the simple act of being heard and believed. Their courage humbled her, their resilience inspired her, their trust honored her. In helping them navigate their own recoveries, Martha had discovered the final piece of her own, the ability to transform suffering into service, trauma into testimony. She had gone for a simple haircut, and it had indeed changed her life forever, not just by exposing the hidden abuse, but by revealing a strength within herself she had forgotten she possessed. The terrifying thing discovered beneath her hair had led to a painful reckoning, but also to liberation and renewal that would have remained impossible had the truth stayed hidden. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Seaside Haven in a blanket of pristine white, nature's way of suggesting that even the most familiar landscapes can be transformed, made new again, one gentle accumulation at a time. Martha's journey from a simple haircut to reclaiming her life reminds us that it's never too late for a new chapter. At 60, she faced the ultimate betrayal from her own daughter, lost her home, her dignity, and nearly her life, yet emerged stronger, with purpose renewed. Her story speaks to all of us who felt invisible or vulnerable as we age, who worry about maintaining independence in our golden years. Martha discovered that true resilience comes not from avoiding life's storms, but from finding our voice within them. She rebuilt not just her home but her sense of self, transforming personal tragedy into community service. She found unexpected joy in her granddaughter Emily, proof that family is defined by love, not blood obligation. Most powerfully, Martha reclaimed her European dream trip at 61 because dreams don't expire with age. What dreams have you postponed that deserve resurrection? What steps could you take today toward reclaiming your own voice and independence? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, like Martha, your greatest chapter may still be waiting to be written, and your experience, even the painful parts, might be the light someone else needs to find their way forward.